Hi, everyone, and welcome to Princess State of Mind. I'm Faith Moore, and this is another mailbag episode. I reached out to you guys on Twitter and Facebook and asked for your questions, any questions that you wanted to ask me. And you guys really delivered. I got some really great questions, and I'm going to do my best to answer them. If you submitted 2 questions or more than 2, I might not get to all of them because I got a lot of questions and they're really good and juicy. But I will try to answer at least one question from each person who submitted a question. Also, if you're watching live and you would like to ask a question, I will do my best to get to live questions also. The only thing is that you have to let me know you're asking a question instead of just chatting with each other in the chat box. So if you would like to ask me a question live, please type question, all caps, in the chat box next to this video, and then type your question. And I will do my very best to watch out for those and answer them. So without further ado, I'm going to get to these questions, and feel free to chime in the chat. And let's just dive in. Let's just get started because I have so many questions. Okay, this one comes from Twitter user Ebisu, and this person wants to know what my thoughts are on the new Frozen. So there is a new Frozen coming out. Frozen 2 is coming out, I think, later this month, and it looks like it's sort of Elsa is exploring her powers and how strong she can be or something. And maybe there's danger and there's a quest. So if you've seen anything that I've ever said, you probably know that I'm not a huge fan of the original Frozen, which I thought was kind of a manifesto about how awful the original Disney princesses were and how awful it is that they fall in love at first sight and that there's even a love story and all of these things, and that it was really catered specifically to break that narrative apart, which is, of course, a narrative that doesn't need to be broken apart. It just needs to be understood better. So I really didn't like that. This one, based on the trailers that we've had so far, seems like it might be more of a quest narrative. There seems to be some sort of other kingdom that's in trouble, and Elsa needs to use her magic, but it's dangerous. And so Anna and Kristoff and Sven and Olaf have to go to this other kingdom and save the day. So I'm sort of cautiously optimistic that it won't be as terrible in terms of message as the original Frozen, because if it's just a quest, then that's fine. I mean, Moana is kind of that sort of hero's journey type story, and I found that to be enjoyable and fine. So I will watch it and hopefully get back to you about that. But I'm cautiously optimistic that it's not going to be the whole manifesto against love that the original one was. So I'm hoping that they're going to steer away from that and move on. So we'll see. I'll get back to you once I've actually seen the movie. All right. Varick wants to know, how do you talk to people? Like, how do you start a conversation without sounding like a crazy person? That's a good question. I think that the answer here, and it's sort of like kind of a frustrating answer if you're like me, is that small talk is necessary. I don't like that because I really don't like small talk. I think it's boring. Who wants to talk about the weather and whatever sports team or news item is going on? And I usually think, because I have social anxiety, I usually assume that when someone starts talking to me about the weather or asking me questions about what I think about something that's sort of random, I assume that they want to get out of the conversation as quickly as possible, because that's very boring. But actually, you have to think about small talk differently. You have to think about small talk as not the words that you're saying, but what you're doing with your words. So even though you might just be saying, hey, weird weather we've been having, or oh, I'm so tired of this heat, when will it really turn to winter, whatever. even though those are the words that are coming out of your mouth, what you're really doing is you're making a connection that isn't crazy. Like you said, how do I do it without sounding like a crazy person? You're making a connection that isn't off-putting or scary or weird. You're saying some safe words that allow the other person to get a sense of your demeanor, your humor, the way that you talk, whether you make eye contact, whether you are inappropriately touching them, those kinds of things. You have to just start there. So I don't know if this question has to do with a sort of romantic situation, like how do you start a conversation with someone you're romantically interested in, or if it's just trying to make friends or just trying not to stand there awkwardly. But I think that the name of the game is, don't assume that if you can't jump right to what are your thoughts about this great piece of literature, if you can't do that, then you're not having a good conversation. Just remember that the small talk is not about what you're saying. It's about the connection that you're making. So just go up to someone and say, hi, how are you doing? I'm whoever. I'm Faith. What's your name? They tell you their name. Oh, here we are in this restaurant. I don't know. I mean, have you been here before? I've never been here before. What's good here? Or, oh, wow, I've never been to this museum. What do you recommend? Just a question is always good. Something safe and non-deep is good. And, just if the person thinks you're a crazy person and you didn't do anything crazy, then they're probably a crazy person, right? If they're like leaving. I mean, I think people sometimes are suspicious and cynical, and they might think that you're trying to ask them out or get something from them or whatever, and that's on them. So I think the most important thing is just remember that small talk is necessary, that you have to start there. And that eventually, if you get to know someone, you will get to the more interesting things and the things that you want to talk about, but you have to start small. So just remember that. Make eye contact, say hello. Don't make a weird joke. Just say, hi, I'm whoever you are. It's nice to meet you. Awesome weather we've been having, right? And make the small talk even if it feels ridiculous. And then, then you go from there. Then you make a connection. That's the point of it. You make the connection and then you move forward. So just try to remember that, because I think what happens is the people that come across as crazy people are people who try to jump into a conversation as if you both really know each other and you're going to have this amazing conversation about your favorite author, and then suddenly the person is like, whoa, hold on, I don't know you at all. So start small. All right, from Brinley. I'm reading these off of actual paper just because I'm old school like that. That's okay. Any underappreciated or unheard of fairy tales you've come across that you think should get more attention? So I just want to give a shout. This is kind of a cop-out because obviously everyone's heard of this story, but I would just like to give a shout out to the actual original Beauty and the Beast, which is not the shortened fairy tale that you find in collections of fairy tales. Beauty and the Beast, for those of you who don't know, first of all, obviously this is my favorite fairy tale, and that's why this is a cop-out, because I just use any excuse to talk about this. But really, Beauty and the Beast is one of these stories that isn't collected by the Brothers Grimm or another anthropologist, or, it's not one of these oral stories from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, although there are many stories throughout time of women having to marry animals or monsters or even inanimate objects. So that exists. But this story was actually written only a couple of hundred years ago by a female author who published eventually published a shortened version of Beauty and the Beast in a popular magazine at the time. But it's actually a novella. And a lot of people don't know this. It's actually a novella. It's about 100 or so pages long. And it has all this backstory about why the Beast is the Beast and what's going on with Belle and her family and where she comes from. So that, I think, is underrepresented or not super well known. So if you haven't read that, you should check it out. It is available on Amazon, so you can find that there. And I think most people don't know that that's the origin of that story, and that it is a longer story than just a sort of short fairy tale. And if you're like me and you love that story, then you're looking for any excuse to read a different version of it. So check that out. Okay, this one is from Eric. Eric says, that you've spoken at length about Henry VIII and his wives and children. Are there other real life royals of old that strike your fancy? I'd say a lot of us would love to hear more of your take on royal history. Well, that's nice. Thank you. So yeah, I'm really into the wives of Henry VIII. And if you haven't heard me talk about this, I was on 2 episodes of the Fighting the Void podcast, which you can find on Twitter or on YouTube, talking about Henry and his wives. The first time and the second time I was talking about the aftermath of Henry's death and what happened then. I got into this topic many years ago when I read a truly terrible novel called The Other Boleyn Girl, which was then made into a truly terrible movie with Natalie Portman and Scarlett Johansson that is really awful. But when I read it, I was just like, wow, how much of this is true? How much of it is not? And I just had to find out what was going on. So then I picked up a copy of Alison Weir's The Six Wives of Henry VIII, which I totally recommend to anyone who's interested in this topic, and read that cover to cover. It was the first history book that I'd ever actually read. I used to have a sort of block about history, and in school I was terrible in history class, but I read this book and I just needed to know more. So now I have an entire bookshelf's worth of books about the Tudors, and I just love this time period. So you can find out more about what I think by watching those things. There's also an entry on my blog about my favorite of Henry VIII's wives, Catherine of Aragon, so you can check that out. But the question is, what other royals? So one thing that happens when you start to get really into a historical period is that, of course, you have to know about what came before and what came after. So for me, what came after the Tudors is not as interesting as what came before. What came after Henry VIII is that he had 3 children who succeeded him, the final one being Elizabeth I, who reigned for many, many, many years. And then their dynasty sort of broke apart, and the Tudors were gone and the Stuarts took over. And I don't really know very much about the Stuarts. I know a little bit about the current dynasty, the Windsors, which is very interesting, but this is kind of asking me about of yore. So I have actually started to get more and more interested in who came before Henry VIII. And when you start to look into that, you very quickly get to Richard III and the Princes in the Tower. And I think that's probably, if people have heard me talk or done some reading about the Tudors and you're like, this is really cool, what else can you tell me? I would definitely go backwards to Richard III, because then you'll get to the amazing, wonderful mystery, unsolved mystery of the Princes in the Tower, along with who was Jack the Ripper. I think what happened to the Princes in the Tower is one of those delicious historical mysteries that you definitely are going to want to read all about. And of course, Richard III is the subject of a very famous Shakespeare play called Richard III, in which Shakespeare paints him as this villain, right? This hunchbacked guy who is just he's just ambitious and, willing to do whatever it takes to get the throne. And this also is an incredibly contentious subject. And there's the Richard III Society who wants to rehabilitate the image of Richard III and say that he was not like that at all. And then there are people who think that it's some of each. And he's very fascinating. And then before that, you get to Edward IV, who was one of these guys, these sort of larger than life guys, and a warrior and a womanizer and all of these amazing things. So if I were you, if you're interested in the Tudors, I would go back and take a look at who came before. So before Henry VIII, you've got Henry VIII's father, Henry VII, but Henry VII won the throne on the battlefield fighting against Richard III. And Richard III died on that battlefield and was only recently rediscovered in a parking lot in, I think, Leeds, England, only a few years ago. His body was found there because he was killed on the battlefield. And that's how Henry VII and the Tudor dynasty began. That's how their reign began. And Richard III took the throne away from Edward IV's children, who were the princes in the Tower. And the question is, why were they in the Tower? Why did he take the throne? And what happened to them? Nobody knows what happened. They went into the Tower, and for a while they were seen by various people, and then they were never seen again. And of course, everybody assumes they were murdered, but by whom? Was it by Richard III, or was it by other factions who wanted to end this line of monarchs? And nobody really knows. There was many years ago, they thought they found their bodies, but that's not 100% confirmed. So that it's a big mystery. And if you don't know anything about that, you should definitely check that out. That's a good one. Okay. Ray wants to know, how would you explain to, in my case, future children, the lessons of Disney princesses and princes without it coming across as too dreamy or unrealistic expectations for a young lady or a young man? That's a great question. So there is nothing, okay. Fairy tales, I'm always saying this, but it's worth repeating. Fairy tales are symbolic, they're metaphors. So the mistake that people make when they criticize fairy tales is to say that they are literal. And that's when you get all of this, like, he kissed her without her consent, or he just likes her for her dress, and that kinds of thing, because that's where you're getting all of these misconceptions, because all of those things, the kiss, the love at first sight, the prince, the princess, the witch, all of that, those are all symbols that mean different things. And I've talked about that in all kinds of other places. Just scroll through this YouTube channel and you'll find all kinds of stuff about that. But so if you take them symbolically, you can interpret all kinds of literal and helpful information about how to live your life. So you have to first read the symbols, interpret them, and then they're telling us important things about life. But Disney princesses in particular are always telling us one very specific, very helpful thing, which is how to live the life that we were meant to live. So that isn't some sort of, poster that says, like, live your best life. That's not what I'm talking about. Because the life that you were meant to live might not actually be the life that you want. It might not be the easiest life. It might not be the life that gets you all of the things that you thought were important. But you are meant to be someone. You're meant to do something. And whatever that thing is the thing that you have to figure out in order to be the best possible version and the most fulfilled version of who you are. And that is what Disney princess movies are about. Think about Ariel, for example. She is someone who would be much happier if she could just be a mermaid, right? If she could just stay a mermaid and find a nice merman and settle down and have a mer family, everything would be much better for her. But there is this thing inside of her that calls her to be a human being instead. And she has to follow that if she's going to find who it is that she was meant to be. And she sacrifices and she works hard and she does what she needs to do. And she ultimately finds that. Same with Belle, right? It would be a lot easier for Belle to stay in the dull provincial town and hang out with her dad and tend to their little garden and their chickens and marry Gaston or some other village guy. That would be a lot easier. But that's not who Belle is. She needs to find people who understand the world the way that she understands the world. And so she has to go forth and do this thing. So that's the message. The message is you were born to be someone, to be a certain way, to do a certain thing, and it might not be the thing that the people around you are telling you it is. You might not be who your parents want you to be. You might not be who your school wants you to be or your friends. You might not be that person. You are someone completely unique, and you need to figure out what that is. And it's not necessarily the easiest thing or the most fun thing or the most financially helpful thing. It just is the thing that is your heart's fulfillment, and you have to find that. So as parents, it's really important. It's really important for us to back off a little bit and see our children outside of the lens of like, this is what I imagine for my child. Success to me is being a doctor or a lawyer, or success is happiness means having this amount of money or living in a certain place or being with a certain person or whatever it is. You need to back off, because that might not actually be what is important for your child. And so, of course, we don't want our children to be destructive or harm themselves or do something that is actually not helpful. But those things aren't actually what your kid is supposed to be. So if they're going down that road, then they're incorrect about what it is that they're meant to do and who they're meant to be. But I think it's important that we recognize that our children are independent beings who might not have the same desires as we do. And so that's a lesson for us. And that's the lesson to teach them, that whatever it is that they want to do, whatever they want to be, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody and it doesn't destroy them, then that is acceptable and fine. And they need to figure that out. And that sometimes it's hard. In fact, it's always hard. And sometimes it requires sacrifice, and sometimes it requires a choice between two things or two people, and that's a choice that they're going to have to make too. And that's what all these movies are about. If you go back and watch these Disney princess movies, that's what they're about. They're in a situation that is holding them back, and they have to figure out how to get out of that situation. And there's always a sacrifice. There's always a breaking away from something that maybe would have been easier. And that's how you look at them. It's not about like, oh, just look for your one true love. You'll see him across the room. And if you don't, he's not the one. That's not it. You have first you interpret the symbols, then you've got a blueprint for what to do next. So hope that's helpful. Okay. Ellen wants to know, why is singleness seen as some sort of disease one must get rid of by age 25, or else you will die an old maid with 5 cats, especially in church? Okay, I don't think you're going to die an old maid with 5 cats in church. I think maybe this idea is prevalent in church. Anyway, I'm not really going to speak about the church and why the church does things. I did not grow up in the church, and even though now I am a Christian, that is something that I myself am still learning about and praying about. I was baptized, I guess, 2 years ago in December. I was baptized in December a couple of years ago. So I don't feel qualified to say why the church does something, but I can certainly talk about this idea about singleness and feeling like you have to get married and all that. So here's the thing. People are happier when they are in committed monogamous relationships. It's just true. People are happy with a partner to spend their lives with. That doesn't mean that if you haven't yet found the person that you want to spend your life with, that doesn't mean that your life is over or not productive or that you're somehow not a full member of society. It doesn't mean any of that. And you can have a totally productive and fulfilling life, even if you never find that person. So that's not it. The idea, I think, is that currently we're existing in a culture that tries to support and push on young people the idea that they can just have all the sex they want, that sex is a sort of end in and of itself, that you've got these drives and you just go out there and you hook up with whoever you want to hook up with, and and you have your career, and that's really important, and you do all of that, and then eventually one of these people will turn out to be your husband or wife. And that's actually a really unhelpful philosophy. It doesn't do anything for us. The truth is that if you do a lot of sleeping around, you will find people who like to do a lot of sleeping around. And none of those people is going to be the right person for you to marry unless you want to marry somebody who likes to sleep around. So, and that's not to say like, that's not to say that you can't have some sort of encounter with someone that then leads to a more productive relationship. That is possible. And please don't write me a letter that says, my husband and I, whatever. Okay. But in general, if what you're doing is following your sexual urges, what you're going to get is a lot of sex. If what you want to do is find a husband or wife, then you have to be engaging in the kind of behavior that allows you to find that right kind of person. So I think if the message that you're getting as a young person is you have to get married right now, right now, right now, that's not the right message. The message that I think it comes from, the reason I think that message exists is because older people want to tell younger people that this kind of hookup culture is not ultimately fulfilling or helpful. And one important part of that is that if you want to have a family, if you want to have a committed relationship, if you want to get married to someone, then you can't spend your 20s and early 30s in this kind of free-for-all lifestyle. You have to operate within the values that you hope to one day live in when you get married. So I'm actually not saying you can't have sex before marriage. That is up to you and your church or whatever, whoever you want to look to for that. But I am saying that you probably shouldn't have a bunch of sex with strangers, that sex should be something that happens between two people who love each other. And I think also that your mind should be on the fact that you are going to be happier and more fulfilled when you find that person that you're going to marry. So I think it's about a mindset. It's not like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a crazy cat lady and never meet the right guy because I'm 25 or whatever. Forget that. Just remember that you need to live your life into whatever it is that you want. And trust me, you probably want to eventually get married and you probably want to eventually have children, although if you don't, you don't. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think people also want to share that if you have this hard charging career and you're like, I don't want, this is so important to me, and you do this and then you get married, but you don't have children, that when you decide that you do want to have a family, as you probably will, although not everybody does, when you decide that you want to have a family, you might be too old. And that's just the sad truth of it, because women can't have children forever. Men can, but women can't. So if you're a woman and you think you would eventually like to have children, you can't have it all. You need to factor that in. And one way to factor it in, by the way, and I wish I had done this, so just hear me out, is that if you have your children first, then you can have a career later. I mean, eventually they're going to leave the house, we hope, and have lives of their own. So then you can have a career after that. And you have all this amazing time. So those are just the things that I think perhaps older people are trying to impress upon you if you are young and thinking about how you want to live your life. But I think if people are telling you like there's something wrong with you, you're 25 and you don't have a million babies or something, then just forget that. Say thanks, but I'm good. Just make sure that you're living the kind of life that you want to be living, and that you're remembering that you're not going to be able to have children forever, right? Once you're like 35, let's say, people can have children at 35. People have children at 40. People have children at over 40. So I'm not saying you're never going to have a child. I'm just saying if you haven't yet tried to have a child and you're getting into your 30s, and you want to have children, you have to think about it. It's just the sad truth of life is that women, this happens to women. So I think it's more about your mindset. What do you want? Don't do things that are going to steer you away from what you want. And try not to worry too much about people that are nagging you as long as you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Hope that helps. Okay. Abigail wants to know, our culture has so many ideas of what a strong woman is. You do a great job explaining how Disney princesses are strong women, but what women in classic literature would you say hold that as well? Sorry, something happened to my printer. I can't read the rest of it. Anyway, who can young women like me look up to? So the idea is who in classic literature is a strong woman? This is a great question. I actually wrote a piece about this for Evie magazine a while back. So if you want, you can just look me up on there. But my go-to classic literature strong women are, first and foremost, Jane Eyre. I love Jane Eyre. If you have not read the book Jane Eyre, please do. Guys, girls, whatever. It's old. It has old language in it. If you don't like that, then maybe don't. Maybe watch a movie of it. Don't watch the recent, just please watch the old Orson Welles, Joan Fontaine version, please. So, but the thing about Jane Eyre is actually feminists really like Jane Eyre as a character because they think that it's all about her saying, I'm free. And she says, I'm not a bird and you can't ensnare me and all of this stuff that gets feminists cheering. But really, I mean, first of all, it's Beauty and the Beast. So that's why I like it so much. It's Beauty and the Beast if it happened in real life and real life was gothic and had a little bit of supernatural in it. But it's a story about a woman who comes from nothing. And the thing that she has, just like I was saying about Disney princesses, is this sense of who she is. And she never compromises it. She doesn't do anything that will take her off course from who she is. And that includes, I mean, I was just talking about hookup culture, right? And people wanting to sleep with you just to sleep with you. That comes up for her. And she says no. And she is also somebody, but she's also somebody who knows that love is important. That when you find the person that you're meant to be with, if you can be with them, you should, no matter what. Well, not no matter what, but no matter what, if everything is okay in terms of what, I don't want to give anything away about the story in case you haven't read it. So that's why I'm sounding weird. But basically she is someone, she's like Belle. She knows who she is and she will never compromise it. And I think that's beautiful. So Jane Eyre. I also, who else do I like? In Dickens is David Copperfield, which is an incredibly long, but an incredibly enjoyable book. You have the character of Agnes, I think, is a really strong woman. She is someone who feminists would totally overlook because she's this very sort of housewifely character who is just calm and quiet and does little things to help people that nobody notices and is supportive and kind, but that is her strength. She is and because she bears all of this heartache and all of this angst and she inside because she sees that it's not helpful to the world around her to be going around all sad and berating people for the things that they're doing. And she's beautiful inside and out. And I love Agnes as a character. So Agnes from David Copperfield, Jane Eyre from Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. And who else? Marmee from Little Women is the mother in Little Women. And she's a very strong character in that she's raising these girls all alone because her husband is fighting in the war and, they're poor and all of these things. And she never complains and she never breaks down and she just keeps it together. And as a mother, even of only one child, I can tell you that sometimes as a mom, you need to break down, but she's so strong in a very feminine way. So I think that those are good, right? And I mean, one other character that you wouldn't want to be this person and she's not like a role model, but I think that she's worth mentioning as a strong character is Fantine from Les Miserables. Les Mis is obviously it's a musical, but it's also a very, very, very long book that has like a 50-page random non sequitur about Napoleon. But it's a really great book if you're into reading 1,200 pages about people in France. It's great. And Fantine is a little bit of a weird choice because she does end up becoming a prostitute and dying. But the whole idea is she has made all these wrong choices and she's had this child out of wedlock, but now she's going to do everything in her power to care for this child, including selling herself. So obviously we don't want to become prostitutes, and we don't want to we want to try not to have children out of wedlock and things like that. But it's just as this heartbreaking picture of now you're in this situation where you have this small child, and it's just that mother love of like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get money to pay for this child to live. So that's a kind of quirky one. Anyway, hope that gives you something to look into. What else? Okay. Derek wants to know, is there a book or tutorial you'd recommend for writing conversations between characters in a story? Or are there writing exercises you would recommend? So those of you who know me know that I do a lot of writing. Much of my published writing is nonfiction, but in my secret heart of hearts, I am a fiction writer and want very much to be able to publish fiction too. And this is a really good question because people's writing tends to sort of fall apart when it comes to characters, because characters are really hard to write because they have to seem real, and they're not real. They just came out of your head. So, and one really hard thing is dialogue, because it has to sound like two people talking, but it can't be as boring as two people talking, right? Two people talking, if you're just like sitting there, is usually kind of boring. It's like, hi, how are you? I'm fine, thanks. The small talk that I was just talking about earlier. So you have to find that balance between making it sound real and also making it interesting to your reader and forwarding the plot. So I don't have a recommendation for like a book that you can read about this, but here's what I would say. You need to go out and you need to eavesdrop on every single person that you possibly can. You need to listen to people talking. So don't be creepy, but go to a restaurant or a coffee shop and listen to people's conversations on the street, when you are talking, when your friends are all talking, and write it down. So write down what people are saying. That's the first thing. Do that all the time. Keep listening. Do it until you can't not do it. Do it until it's so annoying because you're just listening to everybody's conversation. And just listen and write it down. Write it down, like this person, whatever they said, that person, whatever they said. Try not to be too creepy. Try not to let anyone know you're doing it. But listen to people and how they talk, and different kinds of people, men, women, different people talk differently, right? So listen to how men talk, listen to how women talk, how kids talk, how teachers talk, how delivery people talk. Just listen to how people talk. Then use that and see if you can edit it so that it's more interesting. Take out the ums, take out the likes, take out all of those filler words, then take out things that maybe aren't that interesting, or the way that people sort of cycle through. So if somebody is trying to say, I saw a man on the street corner, they might say, I saw this man actually he was over. Take all of that out. Just say, I saw the man on the street corner, right? Edit what they're saying. And once you sort of work through that and you work with what real people are, how they talk, then you'll get an ear for how they talk. And then you'll be able to think about how your characters talk. And remember that even though maybe you're going to take out the ums or the likes or the sort of spiraling way that people talk, sometimes that's important. Sometimes an in dialogue lets you know that the person is thinking, or that they don't want to say what they're about to say, or that they're confused. So this is my advice to you. Just listen to real people talking, write it down, edit it, and then try to write your own and see what happens. That's my advice. All right. Ian wants to know, oh, by the way, I see that there are people watching. If you want to ask me a question right now, you can. You just type it into the chat box on the side of this. I don't know which direction, whatever, the chat on one of the sides, and type question in capital letters and then write your question if you want to ask a question. Or you can just listen to me answering these other questions. But I said that at the beginning, but I think people have joined us. So if you want me to answer a live question, that's what you need to do. Write the word question in capital letters and then your question. And I will try to get to those too. Okay. From Ian, how bad did you find The Little Mermaid live? I think it was the worst one yet, almost High School Musical quality. Yeah, so this was, if you missed it, it was on ABC on Monday, I think it was. What they did is they had the Little Mermaid cartoon playing, and then they had actors come out and do the different musical numbers. And they had some big names, like they had Queen Latifah was Ursula, they had John Stamos was the French chef. I don't remember her name, but the girl that voiced Moana was Ariel. And I assume that the guy that plays Eric is somebody that I'm too old to know. So I don't know if it was. But anyway, Shaggy was Sebastian. So they had some big names. So yes, it was kind of bad. But here's the thing. Here's what I liked about it. I loved the way they integrated the live numbers with the movie. They did this really cool thing where the movie was playing, and then when it was time for the number, the movie was playing on these different screens, and the screens would kind of become see-through, and then you would see the real people, and then the screens would pull away and the musical number would happen. But then at the end, the screen would come back in as if the movie was part of the live thing. So like, what am I talking about? For example, at the end of Under the Sea, when Ariel is missing, at the end, and all the fish are kind of like around the place where she was sitting, they had the screen set up so that all the cartoon fish were around the live spot where Ariel was sitting. So I just thought that part was really cool. I thought it would have been really cool to be there because the audience got to participate. So it was clear that like during the commercial breaks, they would give the audience different things. Like they had little blue ribbons to wave during the beginning when the boat is on the ocean, and they had little claws to like clack together during, I guess it was Under the Sea or something. So they all got to participate. They were dancing around. So that I think it would have been really fun to be there. The problem was the acting was terrible. And I think it must have just been that they spent all this time on all these effects, that they didn't have enough time to practice or something. Because, I mean, Queen Latifah should be the perfect Ursula. Like when they announced that casting, I was like, yes, thank you. That is great. She was going to be great. And she was kind of wooden and just kind of like waddling around in her weird dress. And, the girl, another cool thing was, I don't know if anybody saw the Broadway stage version of The Little Mermaid, which came and went because it was sort of terrible. And it had all of the swimming done on roller skates. So all of the, like Ariel when she was underwater and Sebastian and all the underwater people were skating around, and that was supposed to look like they were underwater, but it didn't. And I mean, obviously to me, the only way to make someone look like they're underwater is to put them on wires. And they did that for this, which was cool. So it had, when she was seeing part of that world, she was sitting down, and then at one point she kind of just like swam and swam out into the audience, which was also really cool. But it was kind of like, that was it. It was like, there was just like a kind of wooden seeming girl singing a song on wires. So, and even John Stamos, who clearly understood that he was playing a cartoon character and was trying to kind of ham it up that way, the whole thing was so weird that he just came across as weird. So yeah, it seemed very weird and sort of amateurish, but I really think it was the acting. I think they didn't have enough time to get all that together, or they'd never done a live show before. I mean, I know the girl that, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, but the girl that plays Ariel she's very young. I think she's like 18, and she's never done, someone was telling me this, she's never done anything other than voice work. So I think maybe whatever, but that's what I thought. Like, I like the idea of this. I hope they do Beauty and the Beast, and I hope they don't mess it up. Okay. Shannon, this is another Little Mermaid question. Shannon wants to know, what do you think of the original Hans Christian Andersen story of The Little Mermaid? Is it better, worse, or equal to the Disney version? So the first thing to say, hold on, is that it's super different. So if you haven't read any Hans Christian Andersen is very weird. Let's just put that out there. It's very weird. If you haven't read any of him, you should, but be prepared. Very strange. And The Little Mermaid is no exception. The other thing that's important is that, like I was saying at the beginning of the show about Beauty and the Beast, this is not a story that gets passed down through generations and has all of that rich fairy tale shorthand in it. It's not. It's a story that he wrote and has whatever symbolism he chose to put in it. So it's a little bit different than some of the other fairy tales. But the other difference is that, first of all, it has a happy ending, but it's not the happy ending from the Disney movie. And it's a little questionable as to how happy the ending is. But where the Disney Little Mermaid is all about, like I was talking about before, it's all about Ariel figuring out how to live the life she was meant to live. So being who you are meant to be, which is what all these Disney princess movies are about. That's what that's about. The Hans Christian Andersen version is all about souls. It's all about how important it is to have a soul. And that's so in the story, mermaids don't have souls. They live for 300 years and then they die and they just disappear. They turn into sea foam. But humans have shorter lifespans, except they have souls that can live forever. And the Little Mermaid wants a soul. I mean, she does fall in love with the prince, and there is this sort of mistaken identity thing of he doesn't know it was her that rescued him. He thinks it was some other girl. But she wants the prince, but she also really wants a soul. And just like Ariel from the movie, she wants to be a human. She's really interested in humanity and human life. And the whole idea, I think, even though it's all very cryptic, the whole idea is about how she goes to the sea witch who says, yeah, I'll make you human. And, if you can stay human, you can be a soul. I mean, you can have a soul, but I'm taking your tongue. You're not gonna be able to talk, and it's gonna hurt like knives stabbing into your feet every time you walk. Okay. But if you can get the prince to fall in love with you, then you can stay human and have a soul. And so she can't do that. She can't get the prince to fall in love with her. And in fact, he marries somebody else. And when that happens, the Little Mermaid's sisters come and say, we traded all our beautiful hair for this knife. Why don't you use it and kill the prince, because he has been so horrible to you. And if you do that, then this knife will make it so that you can be a mermaid again. And she says, no, she's not going to do that, which in my mind signifies that, in fact, she has earned a soul, right? Like in my mind, it's the sea witch is a witch. And so she's not really going to give us a soul for real, right? This is her real test. When all the things that she thought she wanted have been taken away from her, and she's given this chance to have revenge and become this soulless creature again, and she doesn't take that chance. And that's when I think she really has a soul. And what happens is, of course, then she has to die and turn into sea foam as per the terms of her deal with the sea witch. So she turns into sea foam, but at the very last moment, spoiler alert, these angel creatures come out of the sky and say, because you didn't kill him, you now have another chance to earn a soul. You're going to come with us and fly through the air and help people for 300 years. And if you do that, then you will get to have an eternal soul. So I think it's more of Hans Christian Andersen's kind of vision of humanity and souls and what it means to have a soul. And it's a lot more cryptic than the Disney movie, which is just about being who you're meant to be. So I think they're not really comparable in that you can't say like one is better than the other. They're two totally different stories. I do think it's kind of an interesting meditation on what it means to have a soul and whether or not you should want to have a soul. And I definitely think it's worth reading, but I don't think that they're really the same story. I think that Disney just kind of like used that concept. It's clear where they got it from, but they used that concept and kind of built a Disney princess narrative out of it. So not really comparable, both very interesting, both worth checking out. Okay. This one is anonymous. this person says, I'm having trouble connecting with women I'm interested in romantically. As a man, to what degree should I be forthcoming with my emotions and problems? So far, I've been very open, and I'm afraid it's making me look unconfident or unattractive. Okay, this is a great question. It doesn't make you less of a man to want to talk about yourself and your problems and whatever's going on with you. Women are great listeners a lot of the time and want and getting their advice and support and kindness is it's a wonderful part of being in a relationship with a woman. I think the key to your letter is that you're having trouble connecting with women that you're interested in romantically. So that means that you don't yet know them very well. It means that you are trying to make that connection that I was talking about at the top of the show, where I said sometimes you just have to make small talk because small talk isn't about the words that you're saying, it's about the connection that you're making. So this, I think, is the problem. I think if you're on a first date with someone or you are just meeting them somewhere and chatting, that is not the time or the place to unburden yourself to this person. That can come across as needy. It can come across as, I mean, this is true for women too. It can come across as kind of oversharing, because you have to reach a certain stage in any relationship, romantic or not romantic, before you're at a place where you can share all your stuff. I mean, if there's something like really important that you need to say, like I'm in a wheelchair or something, I mean, I don't know, whatever that would be important for someone to know before they even met you or upon first meeting, then by all means share that thing. Or like, I speak in sign language, or, I'm blind or whatever. I mean, if there's something that, and that's hard for me, if there's something that you really feel like is necessary for them to know right off the bat, fine. But if what you're saying is, you struggle with depression, or you wish that you were a published author and you're not, or or whatever it is that is on your mind that you would like to unburden yourself about, the first meeting or the first date is not really the place to do that. The first date or the first meeting is the place for like small talk, or even a little bit further, like, what's your family like? Oh, what do you do for a living? That kind of thing. It isn't the place for you to, it is not the place for you to go off about your ex. It's not the place for you to go off about your boss. It's not the place for you to really go off about anything. It's the place for you to learn about her and for her to learn about you on a sort of basic and superficial level. Once the two of you have been out for a while and you're getting to know each other and you're really in a relationship, if you want to tell her that you're kind of sad or that something is happening at your work that's disturbing, then of course, tell her those things. And there's nothing unmasculine about sharing that you are going through some sort of struggle. That's not it. I think it's just that nobody is prepared for that kind of emotional angst on their first encounter with someone. And I think the caveat to that is that, yeah, I mean, men are in general less forthcoming about their emotions and their internal experience than women are in general. And so you have to know, if you are someone who is more forthcoming, then you have to know that you're with someone that is able to handle that. And you can do things like, you can say, I'm really upset about something. Is it okay if I tell you about it now? Or I'd really like to hear your thoughts on something that I want to tell you about. So I think it's a balance. It's about making sure that you are comfortable with the person and the person is comfortable with you, which means you've spent some time together. It's not becoming sort of histrionic, like sharing. And it's also a question of why. Why are you sharing this stuff? Do you want their support and help? In which case you should share. Is that the way you communicate? Are you a complainer? In which case maybe you should try to temper that with some good things. So, it's a little bit of this question makes me think this person is saying, like, should I just bare my soul all the time? And I think, no, you shouldn't bare your soul all the time. You need to listen to what other people are saying. You need to read the situation and see if this is the right time. So it's a balance. it's tricky, but definitely, I think you need to leave your inner angst out of your first encounter with someone. So hope that helps. Okay. This is another anonymous one. And let's see, there's 4 questions left. So if you want to ask a question live, you have to do it soon. Type question in capital letters and write me your question. Okay. Anonymous. Suggestions for those struggling with depression besides therapy and seeing a doctor. Helpful ways to conquer your day when it's something you struggle with. Yeah. So this is a great question. And I've shared openly that I struggle with anxiety, and sometimes that comes with depression, although it's not something that I have incredible firsthand experience with. And again, not again, but in general, I'm not a doctor, and I don't. So the things that I'm saying are my thoughts and ideas, but remember that I am just me. So, and before I answer this question, which I am going to do, because I know you're saying besides therapy, I just want to say that if you have depression, you probably should be in therapy. And I'm assuming by this question that the person already is in therapy and that's why they don't want to know about that. But since more than this person is listening, I want to say that I know there's some stigma around therapy. People think like that's for crazy people, or I should be able to solve my problems, or I should take it to someone who really knows me. Because how would a person who doesn't know me at all help me with my problems? And I just want to say that none of that is true. If you have an emotional problem, then you should see someone who isn't your friend, someone who is objective and able to sort of remove themselves from whatever relationship you might have with your friend or your spouse or your parent or whoever, and see things from a different perspective. And remember that when you're in therapy, it's completely confidential and they can't share. And you should find a therapist that works. I mean, for example, if you're a Christian and you are worried that if you see a therapist, they won't understand, they'll try to sort of explain that away because they're a therapist, they're a scientist or whatever. Find a Christian therapist. They exist. There is a website. It's called Psychology Today. You can type in, where you live, what kind of therapy you're looking for, what kind of insurance you have, whatever, and they will list you different therapists, and it has little descriptions from each one saying who they are and what they do. They probably have a website. So really, if you're struggling with something, don't be afraid to seek out a therapist. Okay, so that's my plug for therapy. I'm a big fan of therapy, so please. But if you're already seeing a therapist or you can't for some other reason and you're struggling, and it says, how do you get through your day? So I think one important thing is to remember that depression is something that is happening to you, but it isn't you. So if you're feeling depressed, like you don't want to get out of bed, you don't understand why what the point of all of this is, you also have your intellectual self that can talk to that other self. And here is what your intellectual self can say. Your intellectual self can say, you're feeling really awful right now, but it doesn't define you. It isn't who you are. And you can go out into the world and live your life even when you feel this way. And this is something I wrote about recently. The way you feel is not the same as what you do. So take it away from depression for a second. I am incredibly terrified of going into a room full of new people. That makes me like I want to just run away. But I can feel that. There's nothing I can do to stop feeling that way in that moment, right? I can do lots of meditation and go to therapy and stuff. But in that moment, if I'm feeling that way, there is nothing I can do. But I can go in the room anyway. I can be sweaty. I can be shaky. I can be tingly all over. This is things that happen to me. But I can go into the room anyway, feeling that way. And I think when you're depressed, you can feel depressed and get up. You can take a shower, you can brush your teeth, you can eat some breakfast, you can go outside. You can go to your job if you have a job, you can go to somewhere else like the library if you don't have a job, or if it's the weekend. You can get yourself up out of bed. And I'm saying you can. I know that there's some forms of depression that are so severe that you really feel like you can't, and then you certainly need a doctor or a therapist. But if you're basically okay, but you're basically functional, but you're feeling this way inside, what I'm saying to you is you can live your life and feel a feeling. And it's not going to be fun. It's going to be very hard, but you do need to do that. You need to get up out of bed. You need to go to places where there are people. If you don't have a lot of friends or family nearby, and that's part of your depression and you feel lonely, then first of all, just go to a place where there's people. Go to a coffee shop, go to the library, go to a bookstore, strike up a conversation with the barista or the librarian or whoever, make a human connection. In the long term, find clubs, groups, meetup.com, whatever, something in your church where you can go and be among other people. That's okay. So there's that. Be among other people, get exercise. I hate to exercise, but we need exercise as humans, and people who feel depressed really need exercise. Find something that you can do, even if it's just walking for an hour, right? If you want, find an app. I try to walk for an hour. I can't do it every day. It doesn't work. I'm busy, but I try to walk as many days as I can a week for an hour. I got an app that will send me a present if I walk a certain amount of miles. It's called yes.fit, but whatever. There's lots of apps out there, but find a way to get some exercise, to be with other people regularly, and tell yourself that you can do this even when you feel this way. And then I know you said no therapy, but if you are depressed, please seek out a therapist, if you can. So I hope that's helpful. Again, I'm just me, and I'm sure there's all kinds of other people out there on YouTube and in blogs and on websites talking about this same thing. So please do some research too if this isn't helpful. Okay, I'm getting a question here. If you were to script a hang on. If you were to script, it says a Henry III movie, what period/marriages would you focus on? I'm not sure if this is, wait, can you come back and tell me if you mean Henry III or Henry VIII? I don't really know anything about Henry III. Do you mean Richard III, or do you mean Henry VIII or somebody? So I'm going to put that one back for a second. And if you're still watching, come back and tell me which Henry you're talking about. Oh, Henry VIII. Okay. So go back to it. Okay, if I was to script a Henry VIII movie, what period/marriages? Oh, okay, good question. Now I know what we're talking about. I would focus on Catherine of Aragon because she is my favorite wife. I would want to, everybody does this, but I would want to focus on the transition between Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn, and I would want to focus on the relationship between those two women because they would have known each other. Anne Boleyn was Catherine's lady-in-waiting. And I would want to follow Catherine as she is ousted. So a lot of these things make it about Anne because Anne is like sexy, right? And she's the other woman. But I would want to follow Catherine away from the story and see her decline and what happens to her as all of the other stuff happens at court. Hope that answers that question. Okay. Will you do an episode on Star Wars and female characters one day? I don't know. I'd have to know more about Star Wars, but I can try. Okay, almost done. We're running out of time. We're out of time. Okay, here, hold on. There's like 3 more. I'll try to be fast. Eric says, what underrated classic fairy tales would you say deserve to be adapted into Disney princess films? Snow White and Rose Red is one I really like, a different Snow White. And Rumpelstiltskin. Why have we not seen Rumpelstiltskin? Okay, David. Have you seen Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, and what do you make of them? I have seen them, but I really don't remember them at all. And so I can't really answer this question very well. Sorry. Okay, last one. Shannon. Is it possible to embrace your body and sexuality without coming off as dishonest or manipulative? In other words, can you be sexually confident without turning into the evil queen? Yeah, you can, but you shouldn't sleep around. You should sleep with your husband or monogamous partner. So what I'm saying is there's nothing wrong with your sexuality if you're a woman. There's nothing, or if you're a man, but this person is asking, I think, from a woman's perspective. If you are a woman, there is nothing wrong with your sexuality or your body. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have sex, and there's nothing wrong with feeling good about your body or the way that it makes other people feel, or the way that it makes you feel. There's nothing wrong with that at all. What is troubling is people who put their sexual gratification above all other things and say that it is a good in and of itself. Sex is not really a good in and of itself. Sex is something that you share with someone that you love. So, and if you don't do that, it cheapens it, is the problem. So if you're just like, I have a sex drive and I need to fulfill it. So you just go out there and you sleep with some rando that you met in a random place, then you have cheapened yourself. Because sex is really important and your body is important. And it's not that like, oh, don't think about sex, don't have a body. Like it's not that at all. The point is the opposite. It's so important that it should only be shared with someone that you really love and who loves you in return. And it's this beautiful melding of two souls, etc. So you certainly can be a sexual being and be okay and confident in your body, but you shouldn't cheapen that by giving your body to whoever you feel like. So I hope that answers your question. I think sometimes this kind of like, abstinence before marriage and all of that gets translated into like there's something wrong with sex or there's something wrong with your body, or I think it gets sort of all translated into don't do that, but it isn't that. It's important, so don't share it with whoever, and don't it's a drive, just like rage is a drive, right? You shouldn't just let your rage out whenever you feel like it. You shouldn't just like punch people in the face because you're mad, because it feels good. I mean, it feels good to be angry sometimes, and it feels good to panic. I mean, the other day I was with my son. We live in New York City. We were in the subway. Something had gone wrong with the train. My phone was out of batteries. I didn't know how to figure out where we were supposed to go. And I just was standing there for a second being like, it would be really awesome if I could just like scream really loud right now. Like in this subway station, holding my son's hand, I was like, I really wish I could just scream at the top of my lungs, but like, I shouldn't. I would have scared my child. I would have scared people around me. I would have been seen as a lunatic. And that would cheapen me, right? Because I am a human being capable of self-control, and I exercised my self-control. Same with sex, right? We might feel sexually attracted to all manner of people. But if we're married, then we shouldn't act on that. And if we're not married, then we shouldn't act on it whenever we feel like it, because that cheapens us. So totally fine to be a sexual person, totally fine to be comfortable in your body, not totally fine to sleep with whoever you feel like. Hope that's helpful. Okay, that is the end of that. Thank you so much to those of you who have been watching and asking questions and chiming in. I see you. And I'm out of time. I'm over time. So thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure that you are following me on Twitter and Facebook. It's up there on the screen, because that's when you'll find out when the next episode is going to be and what it's about. And if you're new and you just want to know more about me, feel free to check out my website, which is right there on the screen, because that's where you can see all of my stuff. And you can even buy my book if you want to. It'd be awesome. So thanks so much for watching. It's a pleasure to talk to you. This has been Princess State of Mind. I will see you next time. All right. Now there's an awkward pause and then bye. Okay, bye.